Hi, I'm Bill Calogero, and we're here at the Turning Stone Resort and Casino in Verona, New York, and it's time for another Billy C's Roundtable. I'm joined with former light heavyweight contender Bob Benoit. Hey, listen.
You're getting better.
That's why I say Billy C, because I can't even pronounce my own last name. Dax Khan and Alex Papali. We're going to talk about two quick topics, get everybody's opinions on this. And the first one that I wanted to talk about, and Bob, we'll start with you. Muhammad Ali is kind of regarded as the trash talker. Now, he wasn't the first guy that started talking trash, but since he has, and since he, became known for his trash talking in and out of the ring,
Right.
It seems that today every single fighter goes through that, what I call the Muhammad Ali thing. They do it for the pre-fight press conferences and all that stuff. I mean, what's your thoughts on the Muhammad Ali trash talk before and during the fights?
Well, it worked. It worked. Got people's interest. It just worked. And he got that from Gorgeous George. He went to a wrestling match. He saw Gorgeous George with all his all his props and his persona and antagonizing his opponent, and it worked. And he grasped that idea, that concept, and put it into his own persona, and he did it very well. I mean, he was Gorgeous George on steroids. So it's entertaining, and like you had said before, at the end of the fight, when the fight's off, they end up hugging each other anyway.
Right.
99 times out of 100, that's how it ends up.
Right. Dax, the thing is that I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, when's somebody going to come up with something new? Is there something new? I mean, that's the real question. I mean, and how do fans? I mean, we all know it. We talk about it all the time. We know that it's all BS. We know that they're trying to sell tickets. Does it actually work? Do they sell tickets by doing it?
Sure. I mean, the ones that are the best are the guys that, they're doing it to sell tickets, but they're genuine in what they say. For example,
Are they though?
Perfect example, Mike Tyson, and you know what? One of my all-time favorites.
Oh no! Don't! Oh, I thought you were going to mention Lennox Lewis, but go ahead.
Lennox did all his trash talking with this. That's all he needed to do. Yeah. But Ricardo Mayorga was another one. But they believed in what they were saying. When Mike Tyson sat there and used to spew out this dictionary of words that didn't exist, he meant it, he meant it, I'm gonna discuss it, he meant grabbing himself. I mean, he was really, you could see the look in the face. Same thing with Ricardo Mayorga. He meant everything he said. Him and Fernando Vargas, when he just berated Fernando Vargas, berated Fernando's mother. Afterwards, like Bob said, he went over on his knees. Remember after the fight, he went on his knees after he beat up Fernando really bad. Of course, obviously it was a shot, Fernando Vargas. He went on his hands and knees to Fernando Vargas' mother. He grabs her hand after the fight and he kisses her. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
I didn't mean it. It was just about the fight. But at that time, Ricardo meant it. Yeah. Just even after when he knocked out Vernon Forrest. Smoking a cigarette in the ring. Sure, it's good. But they have to mean it. And the guys today that do this stuff like the shock value, and and when they're pushing it's phony, you take away the legitimacy of it. You know what? People just want to click off. I do.
Okay. Alex, what do you think, man?
I think that we've certainly seen an evolution of it, and I think that there's certain instances where guys maybe go a little too far. I mean, but I do think for the most part it's part of the sport. I think recently, I don't know. I mean, you got to realize that boxing is very different. It's more spectacle than sport in a lot of ways. It's legalized assault, remember, and the risk is so high that I don't know. For me, at least, I'm willing to tolerate more trash talk because these athletes are giving so much of themselves that it doesn't upset me if there's a little bit of trash beforehand. Sometimes it goes too far. I mean, I'm thinking of the Hopkins Trinidad pre-fight stuff with some of the stuff where Hopkins dishonored the flag of Puerto Rico. Did it work? Yes. Did he apologize later? Yes.
He still doesn't go back to Puerto Rico, I'll tell you that
I think even more recently with Froch Kessler too. Froch said a few things about how he intended to kill Kessler in the ring, and then he had to walk those comments back the next day. Personally, it's not that I condone it, but this is a sport where it's a little different, you know. If you were saying that in a soccer game, or if you were saying that about a basketball game, yeah, it seems outrageous. But outrageous is a little bit par for the course with boxing. But at the same time, I do think, you know, remember we're all human beings here, and we want to be respectful of each other.
I, for one, would like to see somebody come up with something new, because I think it's just the same old thing over and over and over.
Well,
and a lot of times, I don't believe any of it.
Well, I think that's a good point. Is we unfortunately see something new that's part of that. I would put as part of the trash talk, and that's these reality shows that hype a fight where you have with HBO 24/7 some of these pay-per-view events that are barely a decent matchup, and you end up with 4 episodes of a show that follows every bit of minutia in the pre-fight. In a way, to me, that's a form of trash talk, because you're presenting something that's not real.
Minutia. Is that a color? I think that's a color.
You're asking me?
Yeah. But you know, you mentioned something that was a great segue. We want to talk a little about Floyd Mayweather Jr. going up against Saul Canelo Alvarez. And I won't watch those shows because I get turned off by them, because I don't believe that they're real. I don't believe that, you know, that I know that they're behind the camera. I know, oh, break, you know what, you got to look a little meaner, Roger, you know, Floyd Sr., you know, why don't you throw something around, I don't buy that. They just don't notice those 40 camera guys and all the lights around, and you're getting the real thing. So with that said, what's your thoughts on Mayweather? I know that you don't really follow the sport as much, but you had some pretty good opinions about Floyd and some of his troubles.
Well, you know, I think he's an idiot, because
I love this guy.
you know, well, in boxing, a lot of fighters get in trouble in their lives, but it's usually before they're into boxing. You know, as troubled youth, okay, earlier in their career they might make a mistake. Who the hell gets into trouble he gets in when he's got $20 million or more, ends up going to jail? What is he, out of his mind? Jeez, that's supposed to happen when you're 18 or something, or 17.
Right.
Good God, I don't know who's watching him, who's guiding him. It's amazing how foolish that. When did he get out of jail? He did 3 months, right?
Yeah, he didn't do 3 months.
What was it, June of last year?
He didn't even do that. That whole thing.
June,
he did about an hour and a half. You know, he was complaining. The best thing was when, you know, he's complaining, I don't have bottled water, I don't like the food, and the judge says, it's called jail. You know, I mean, what did you think? We were going to have a private chef? Dax, what do you think of the Saul Alvarez fight? We're talking about it every day. It's months away. You know, I'm afraid to go on air with our daily show, because I look at these emails and I'm like, when are they going to stop talking about it? But Saul Alvarez against Floyd Mayweather, it's scheduled for September 14th in Las Vegas. What's your thoughts on the fight?
You know, I give Floyd credit for taking the fight, because he is fighting, you know, these younger guys, and he's fighting these hungrier guys. Some he hasn't done a lot in his career. But Saul Alvarez, I think, you know, people are underestimating him a lot. I'm not going to say he's going to win the fight, but you know what? He's a young kid. He's 22 years old. He's still growing. He's getting better with each fight. And you know something? If you sleep on this kid has serious power in both hands, and he's always got to punch his chance. And you know, Austin Trout, who is a legitimate fighter, I've seen Austin fight in person a lot of times. Austin very well rounded, and you know what? He gave Austin Trout fits. Austin had a hard time hitting him. Austin had a hard time catching him. And this is a young kid. Sure, he may have 42 fights, I think he has now, but you know, he has 0 amateur experience. This kid's getting better and better and better. You know, sleep on this kid.
Alex, Austin Trout's a quality fighter, but he's not Floyd Mayweather. How's the fight going to go, man?
I think it's going to look similar to the Austin Trout fight with Canelo, but I think that with Mayweather doing similar things to what Trout, but far more effectively. I think Dax is right about in terms of the size and the power. I'm curious to see how Floyd reacts to that. But I do think, and I do think the fact that Canelo does not have that amateur pedigree is going to hurt him against a guy like Floyd, because, when you get a guy like Floyd, maybe, he's sort of forgotten a lot of the tricks that Canelo's never even learned. So in some ways, I think it might at times look like a man against a boy in there. But I do think that the size and the hunger of a youthful champion like Canelo is going to make it very interesting.
Early prediction, Alex, who's going to win?
Floyd, unanimous decision.
Early prediction, Dax, who's going to win?
I'll say a Floyd decision, but you know what? I wouldn't really call it an upset if Canelo knocked him out.
I see that fight going. I agree with both you guys in the sense that, you got experience and age.
Floyd's fought at 154 before. He's won titles, but every guy that he's fought at 154 is a guy who formally moved up, isn't it? This is the first true 154 pounder he's ever fought.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be the significant question.
Here's
what's that going to mean.
Here's what's going to happen. Floyd Mayweather, who I'm not a big fan of, I just think what we're going to see is an aggressive and just like I was starting to say, you got a young fighter, no amateur experience. He's 22 years old. You know how we all felt when we were 22 years old, invincible. I think that we're going to see this guy come after Floyd, and his goal, all he wants to do is take Floyd's head off. And all this pre-fight stuff that we were talking about is going to get him even more jacked up. And what we're going to eventually see after the third round is Saul Alvarez stalking Floyd all around the ring and Floyd picking him apart. It's not going to be a knockout. I'm going to be rooting for Saul, but I think Floyd's going to come out on top, just like everybody else. As a matter of fact, everyone laughed at me, but I thought that Robert the Ghost Guerrero would have been a harder fight for Floyd. And we saw that Robert the Ghost Guerrero he couldn't make any adjustments in the fight. So the question is going to be, can Saul Alvarez make adjustments? And it certainly didn't help last week when Saul Alvarez's team started telling everybody what their game plan was. You don't do that with Floyd Mayweather, Alex.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think like you've said in the past, especially in reference to the Klitschko brothers, is it's one thing to talk about your game plan, it's another thing to actually implement it and have it become effective. So in that sense, I don't think it matters much that they mentioned it, but it is sort of interesting because you wonder if there's a sort of reverse psychology behind it, that maybe Team Canelo is saying it because they're planning something different.
What was the game plan?
They said that they were going to work the body. Nobody's worked the body, and I agree with the game plan. I just wouldn't
to try to break
say
him
it,
down.
What do you think, Dax?
I think if you can't discourage this kid, you got problems. That's if you can't. That's the thing right there, discouraging him with Robert Guerrero. Robert fought hard. He fought all at the end, but you could see on Robert's face at times he got a little bit discouraged. He got a little frustrated.
But he didn't make any adjustments. That's what bothered me. That's what bothered me in that fight.
But Canelo, even if he doesn't really make a lot of adjustments, if you can't discourage this kid, as you're saying, this is a kid. You're a perfect example. Sergio Martinez versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. You know what? Martinez gave him a boxing lesson that whole fight, but in that 12th round, Junior was coming after him. He caught,
Didn't he smoke a joint in the 11th round, and that was what,
And even then, you know what I mean? You got Junior there sitting there in between rounds, he's got the munchies, and he still knocked the middleweight champion down. So if you can't discourage Canelo, you know what? You're in trouble, because this kid is definitely looking for the win. He's not looking for a payday. The kid wants to be a legend.
Hey, I think he's going to be a legend, but it may not happen in September. One last thing before we go. Bob, quick question. Floyd Mayweather Jr., would he have survived in your era or an era before? If we took Floyd today, the same Floyd, that same personality, his same mannerisms, everything that's made him what he is today, and we pick him up and we put him in a era, the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, or earlier, is he as successful as he is today?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, he is. He'll have less friends though.
You know, I'm very
Well,
surprised.
that was one of the
That-
things I was going to ask Bob. Is that did you ever face a guy that had a similar style as Floyd, where
Wow.
they were just a big counterpuncher that maybe caught you a few times early, and then set a slow pace where they just did enough to win each round. Were very defensive, but were able to tag you when it mattered and pile up those points and cruise to a decision.
create frustration.
Yeah, probably Lenny Hutchins. I fought in Philadelphia. I fought a 10-rounder in Philly with him in '69. The only difference is he started off hot and heavy, and he kept it coming for all 10 rounds.
And you found yourself like hesitating on the outside because you know what's going to happen.
Well, you
if
had
go in
him.
there.
He kept firing and firing, and I was a counterpuncher. Well, there has to be a bit of a pause in the punching to make sure counterpunching. You know what I mean? I took the game right away from me.
That's an interesting thing, and I would have if we would have taken bets before, and we knew the question that I was going to ask you, I would have bet everything I had that you would have said no, that he wouldn't have survived. So
He's an immense talent. He's an immense talent. It's his personality that gets in the way.
But when do you? I use this analogy. These guys have heard it 100 times, but you haven't, so I'm going to use it again.
Okay.
If and I know you're a Patriots fan. If the New England Patriots played the worst team in the NFL every week, let's say my Jets, all right? They played the Jets every week, okay? And they ended the season 16-0. Can they say they're the best team in the NFL? That's my point with Mayweather. The knock on him is that he hasn't challenged himself. He hasn't fought. Now it's hard to say this. It's hard to say it now.
Yeah.
It's hard to say it now because he is seemingly stepping up and fighting the fights. But I mean, the argument on him is that he's cherry-picked his opponents.
Well, I'm very seldom without words, but you really stopped me dead in my tracks with that question.
But could you say that they're that good if they played the worst team at week in and week out?
Well, you can say it. Doesn't mean that it's the truth.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And I think
Okay.
that's the thing is that
And that's-
today, that's what happens is that the way the landscape of the sport is that you could get a whole network to say something, and if they say it loud enough and long enough,
It becomes
people
the truth.
right,
Yeah.
people agree
Yeah.
with it, and the voices that challenge it become softer and softer. That's not to say, and I don't want to make that sound as if I'm saying that Floyd Mayweather is completely manufactured. I certainly don't believe so. I do think I think the Guerrero fight was certainly overhyped. That to me was that I thought we saw what we were going to see. That one of the major things into that was the 3 degrees of Andre Berto that they were sort of thinking of was meaning something wonderful. That he beat Andre Berto, right? But that was Andre Berto.
Right.
That's not hardly a stepping stone to Floyd Mayweather.
No. Reluctantly, I do have to give Floyd some credit in his last several fights. I do put Victor Ortiz in there, even though I think it was a legal sucker punch, Alex. But he did step up and fight a tough guy there. Miguel Cotto, I give him credit for. Of course, the Robert De Ghost Guerrero fight, and now you got to give him credit for Saul Alvarez. So appreciate everybody joining. I want to thank Alex, Dax, and my man Bob. And the guy behind the camera, Jerry. Thanks for everything. We'll see you next time. You talk about Sugar Ray Robinson, fighting Joey Maxim. Moves up to fight Joey Maxim.
Right.
Even Roy Jones Jr. Give him credit. He fought John Ruiz at heavyweight.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Donnie Lawal.
Well, that's a fluky thing.
That's
Because-
a I know that a
See,
small guy though.
But no, that it's like the model is there for Floyd to follow because that was tailor made for Sugar Ray.
It was because there was two.
Why can't they do that kind of thing with Sergio Martinez?
But talk about catch weights. There was 2 titles on the
Right.
line, and how
and
do
he
you
only
do
had
that?
to make the 168.
Yeah.
It didn't make
Yeah,
sense
you do.
because then you have the 175-pound champion weighing 168, giving up his 175-pound title.
Right.
So, yeah,
Me and Scott got into that debate after Kessler and Froch too, and he was, Ward needs to go over there and prove himself, and that's it. I'm like, listen, Right, as of right now, Ward has the win over him. As of right now, Ward is the top guy in the division. As of right now, you got to come to Ward. Ward has nothing to prove.
Well, there is the argument about Andre Ward.
He hasn't gone
and he
overseas.
hasn't gone anywhere. The only time he actually fought, as a top pro out of
Atlantic
California
City.
was Atlantic City.
That's when he beat Froch, isn't it?
Wasn't that was that
Froch and Johnson was the Super Six.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's where he beat Froch, because I think that is where he beat Froch,
I can't
because
remember.
Froch beat Johnson in Atlantic City.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
Froch was funny because he said that he'd be willing to go to a neutral site to fight.
Like Las Vegas.
Yeah.
How's neutral?
When has that been
Froch
neutral?
Is England. He went to Denmark. Froch is, listen, when you start
like-
talking about, fighting the best of the best, I mean, really, three names come to my mind: Froch, Andre Ward, and friggin' Abner Mares. You can't forget about that guy either.
Yeah, he's really good.
No, but I mean, fighting the best in his divisions.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Froch has definitely fought, everybody there is to fight.
Take two. Take
It's a
two.
lot different when he's not in the basement with his pajamas underneath the desk.
No, I can't do that anymore. All right, you guys ready?
Ready?
Hey, I'm Bill Calogero, and we're getting ready for our first Billy C's Roundtable. And today's round, first of all, I want to give special thanks to Jerry D'Angelo. He's behind the camera.
No,
What do you mean, no?
Jerry G. Angelo.
Oh,
And don't worry about me until you know exactly what this.
Until you know my friggin' name.
don't worry.
Until you're passionate about know everything in detail. Don't worry about it. Seriously, don't worry about it.
All right.
You just do what you do.
All right. I'm Bill Calogero, and this is our first roundtable, Billy C's Roundtable. And for today's roundtable, to my right, I got former light heavyweight contender Bob Benoit.
Benoit will do fine.
Benoit. And we got Dax Khan, a contributor to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. And of course, Alex Papali. He too is a contributor to the show. Today's topic for our roundtable is going to be the business of boxing and how it's changed and evolved over time. And how I want to start this, guys, is this. Prize fighting, the term prize fighting, has always been about fighting for money. And like we were talking earlier, way back in bare knuckle days, when you scheduled a fight, the winner would get all the money and the loser would basically get nothing. They used to take a collection up for the loser, and it's kind of changed up until what we have today. Now, Bob fought in an era where, well, tell us, what was the deal about making money? And I mean, did you do it for pride? Did you do it for money? I mean, what's the truth?
Well, I did it for money. I mean, at the time, I was 18 years old. I was married, had a child, and I'd work all week long. I'd come home with $75. So if you could have a fight, you'd pick up $50. Well, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. So you'd have a 4-round fight. They'd pay $50. In New England was where I had most of my fights. Sam Silverman ruled the roost. Sam Silverman was a legendary promoter for 40 years. He's known as Subway Sam, Unsinkable Sam Silverman, and he was a legend. He was also very cheap. And he'd fight you over $10. But in 1966, when I started, I was, like I said, I'd make $80 a week working in a factory, and if I could go and make $40 or $50 in a 4-round fight, it helped. It helped, And he ran shows every week. He ran shows in Portland, Maine. He ran them in New Bedford, Mechanics Hall in Worcester. He was the glue that held boxing together in New England for many, many, many years. So, to answer, I don't know, did that answer your question?
Well, it's on the right track, I guess, But Alex, you and I worked on a project together about a bare knuckle fighter, Tom Molyneux, and we learned a lot about him and the price, I should say, the purse structures, and how these guys fought. And when we were talking earlier, when you put the value of the money in perspective, it really hasn't changed that much. I mean, those guys were making more money than the guy working, so to speak, a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, I think that's the big in some ways that has changed dramatically today because, and this was something that was said up at the Hall of Fame the other day, the journalist Colin Hart, who's getting in this year, mentioned how, it used to be the tradition in the whole world of sports that the heavyweight championship was the greatest prize in sports. Today, if you join the NBA and do well, you might make more than a heavyweight champion possibly could, at least in the short run, and you don't have the same risks. So yeah, I think that the fact is that as much as there is all these kinds of real noble qualities, human qualities that are shown there in the ring of courage and pride and everything, it still is a job. It's a way of making a living. And it does have to provide some sort of stable sustenance for the people that do it.
Dax, Bob mentioned about pride, and we were talking earlier about, rankings and stuff like that, and, you work your way up to a contender. And when there was one champion, 8 divisions, those guys got to that they created that value, to make it to that contender spot. Today it's a little different. There's so many different weight classes. There's all these sanctioning bodies, and we were talking the other day that conceivably if you pick just 5 of the sanctioning bodies, you could have 50 different top 10 contenders for every weight division. So I mean, and then again we got the value and the business part that gets factored in. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, nowadays definitely the world titles are watered down. So, to be recognized, I don't care who's out there, whether you like them or not, you have to have that desire. Of course, it's a business aspect. And you brought up a good point before where, nowadays guys are getting smarter. It's not like it was back in the old days. How many of the guys, they died broke, even the legends, the Ray Robinsons, very few guys like, the Alis and that who've been able to use their persona and their personality afterwards to continuously carry them over. And, but now, use the heavyweight division as weak as it is, you have people like the Klitschko's. Fighters are smarter than what they were. They've learned from the past. But, also, I don't care how much money you're making. You have to have the desire to be a fighter. If you don't have it inside you, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're taking that punch and the first time you get rocked, you're not going to fire back. There is no glory. And you're not getting paid on top of it.
Well, that's a great segue, Bob, because we always say, at least, I always say that the fighters and these guys, they have to agree with me, otherwise we fire them. But the thing is this, you say to yourself, these guys today, the pride factor that you mentioned before. And what Dax mentions today, there's a script of how to get a title shot, and we already admit that the titles are watered down, so they don't carry the juice that they used to.
No.
But there's a script now, and they build up the record. They don't care who they're fighting. You got the TV networks, the promoters, everybody else. They look at that They see a fighter, a young fighter. We saw one last night, undefeated, 24-0. Who's he fought? And he loses to a guy with 5 or 6 losses that was supposed to lose.
Oh, really?
Last night. But my point is that when did the pride factor end? Because today it's all about the money. It's all about positioning to get that title shot that's associated with the money. And you fought in an era where I believe that pride still was an important part of the game.
Oh yeah, nobody wants to lose. At what point, who wants to lose?
Yeah, but don't you learn from a
everybody
loss?
has pride.
But don't you learn from a loss? A good fighter will take what he learns.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. What happened is that media has interjected themselves into the sport, and they're marketing it, and they're going to twist it to what way will market best. Okay, and somebody with a undefeated record it's eye-catching, it's ear-catching, okay? And it's going to market well. It's, if we could take them out of it, okay, and have no TV, all right, and just have fights like they used to, small fight clubs everywhere, okay?
Well, look at
this. It would rejuvenate a certain aspect that's missing now, but that ain't going to happen.
In the era that you fought, in the late 60s, early 70s, and actually a little before that, there was so much boxing on television, and this is amazing that there was
Right.
so much boxing on television that they had a separate TV guide just to keep track of all the fights. So I mean, it's not like the fights weren't on television. I just think that what you hit on was that the television, when a fighter gets on TV now, there's just a lot more money to be made.
And it actually bastardized the sport, if there's such a word. I think there is.
I think so.
Okay? and it took away a certain element that was prevalent in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And they, TV was a big introduction into the sport of boxing. And it helped and it hurt at the same time. It killed all the small fight clubs, the small gyms, and you can't have it both ways. What do you want, TV, or do you want live shows?
But, Alex, we're always talking about the people that are making the decisions, and Bob hit it right on the head. We talk about this all the time, where, that's what they're selling. They're selling the 24-0 guy. We want to see him, he must be good. He's undefeated. He's got 24 wins.
Right.
He's got no losses. He must be good.
Right.
And my big gripe is that the guy making the decision to bring that fight to his or her network doesn't know the sport.
Right.
They're looking at that
Exactly.
24-0 record.
Exactly.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think what Bob said is true. That I think one of the things that's happened is that, and perhaps I'm showing some of my radical socialist leanings here, but as things have,
He's sitting over there.
as things, I mean, we're living in the
Don't get him
21st
started.
century here, where we've seen the 80s, where the rise of corporate power and really the marketing. Everybody now is part of, especially with the internet. Everything has been marketed like crazy, and what happens with that is you get these little false realities that within their own world, if you just look at the small picture they're presenting, things look great. Yes, this guy's a title holder and he's fighting here on our network and he's the champion. But if you just look at that casually, okay, you're watching a title fight and you watch it. And for the uneducated viewer,
Right.
that's enough.
Yeah.
And that's what the suits, if you will, making the decisions, that's all they care about. And for that, you want to have things that look good. So a guy who's 24-0, they don't care who he's beaten. He's got a 24-0 record. So that's going to look good on our network.
Yeah.
Whereas a guy who maybe is 11 and 7, who maybe those 7 losses were good fights
Yeah, yeah.
and close fights,
Yeah.
the network's not going to show him.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think because of that, you have a watering down of the very best at the sport, because you almost end up getting just the best of what network has to offer.
Dax,
Yeah.
Alex has gone on record as saying that, he doesn't care about the same fan he's referring to now, that casual fan that is actually, maybe he's got a point, because that casual fan that's looking
Yeah.
at that 24-0 record and saying, oh, he must be good,
Yeah.
maybe he's got a point that, boxing maybe has it evolved to the knowledgeable fan, the guy that can look at that 11-7 record and say, wow, this guy's a lot better, really, than that 24-0 fighter.
You know what really hurt is boxing has had to, the guys have had to become showmen, not showmen like back in the Ali days where, they talked a good smack, but, showmen like, Mayweather, where they have to have the big build-up.
Right,
You know
right.
who caused that? And as much as I love him, know him since, been following him since I was a kid, was Mike Tyson. He was the, the start of the big pay-per-view era. But, the casual fan, like Alex was talking about, were the ones who buy the pay-per-views, and, they were getting awful mad at Mike knocking guys out in the first and second round at $50 a pop.
I don't know if I agree with that, because
Yeah.
people love. I know myself during the Mike Tyson, which is pretty sad. All of us in this room can think of the Mike Tyson era as just happened a couple of years ago, and it's been 25 years. But
Yeah.
the thing is that I knew that myself when there was a Mike Tyson event on. I was just as happy if that fight had ended in 30 seconds or if it went long into the 6th round or something.
Absolutely. I mean, sure, we kept buying, we'd all complain. Matter of fact, I remember after one Tyson fight, at the time, I was only maybe 21. I was a bouncer at a bar, and I had a friend of mine fill in because it was a Tyson fight off the top of my head, I can't remember, and I remember going out to the bar and working the door, and they had a karaoke thing on, and the boss says to me, he goes, "Oh, where you been?" I said, "I just got ripped off by Mike Tyson." I said, a minute and 10 seconds into the 2nd round. But, we went and we bought the fights again anyway. But, now as the price of it's gone up, people nowadays are saying to themselves, and you got to blame the networks for this as well, why am I paying $60 for a fight that next week I'm going to watch for free?
Because you want to see it live. I mean, I have an excuse. I have to do it. But, Bob, you said an interesting thing before. We were talking before we went on about the purses and how they really didn't change for a long time. And like what Dax was saying, in that era, the 80s, they actually were making some big purses. I mean, the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Tommy Hearns, Mike Tysons, Holyfield, they were making double-digit millions.
Right.
And that kind of feathered out a little bit. But what we were talking about earlier, you said for at least 20 years that 4-round or 6-round fight, they were making the same.
Stayed right there. And pay-per-view, okay, is what jacked the prices up, purses up, okay? That's, you can get 10,000 people in an auditorium, or you can get 200,000 people watching it on TV.
Right.
Do the math. You're going to make more money. So, like I said, in one hand it helped, okay, in the other hand it hurt. So, take your choice. But get back to fighters and records. Brings to mind a fighter called Lou Jenkins. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Also known as Sweetwater Lou, okay, from Sweetwater, Texas. If you look at his record, he was welterweight champion of the world.
Right. He's a Hall of Famer, isn't he?
Yes. A Hall of Famer. Look at his record. Start off, win, loss, win, loss, draw. I mean, and it was banging around Texas, okay, and they finally got on his motorcycle and drove up to New York City and took a locker at Stillman's gym and took off from there. But they're very up and down record, okay? So records can be earned and they can be also created.
That was then. Today's fighters look at the O. We hear that from the younger boxing fan on a daily basis. They put so much value in the O. You know who, the guy that I can't stop bringing him into the conversation, but Floyd Mayweather Jr., he banks his whole legacy on that O, Alex.
Yeah, on being undefeated, it's tremendously important, to him, and it is important in terms of the sport. But you're right. I mean, I don't think it's not everything. I
don't think it defines a quality fighter.
A fighter can lose a fight today, and he's locally. He could be a buy. I saw him fight last night. He'd look, and they write you off. Where the Red Sox or the Yankees could play and get killed one day, and they come back the next day
and that game is forgotten.
They forget all about it. There's
right.
a bigger stigmatism attached to the sport of boxing than any other sport, a win or a loss. It really is.
It's the win-loss thing is funny to say, because the other day, on I think it was Thursday's show, we were talking about the win-loss thing, and the one that I brought up was because Arturo Gatti is getting inducted this weekend, was his fight with Thomas Damgaard over in Denmark. Now we'll talk about the pride part and how important the O is. Now Arturo here, he could always draw in Atlantic City, no matter what. Arturo's always going to pack the house. Especially after his fights with Mickey Ward. Everybody wanted to watch Arturo. Everybody wanted to watch Mickey because you were going to have a good fight.
Even before that, Tracy Patterson fights, he was just
Thomas Damgaard had the O at the time, and over in Denmark, you know what it was? He was a national hero because he had the O. Yeah. He had some version of a title that's not even in the top 5 or top 6 of the ABC. And Arturo went over there because that's where the money was, and they knew Thomas was going to pack the house. They knew that they were going to get a good TV audience. Arturo goes over there and blasts room in a couple rounds because Damgaard made the mistake of let me go in there and try and be like Mickey Ward did. I'm going to be a hero at home. Where's the lad? Never heard of Thomas Damgaard again after that. Right. But the O was important.
Arturo was a prideful man. He was a prideful fighter. He lost a fight in Atlantic City. It might have been one of the Ward fights or something, or the Ward fight. But he had a limousine that drove him in there. He walked. He walked from Jersey City back to New York. He walked. Wouldn't take the car. He was humbled. Okay, and he said, "I deserve get a ride back. So he walked back.
Well, see, that the old thing bothers me because, like you point out about Lou Jenkins, but there's so many great fighters that you could say. Henry Armstrong, didn't he start out 0-2, 0-3, something like that? You know, I mean, Jack Johnson lost many fights.
Oh,
The great Sugar Ray Robinson lost
John
great
Hopkins.
fights.
Yeah,
B-Hop.
Hopkins first
Lost his
fight.
first fight.
Lost,
Yeah.
Did he really?
Yeah,
I didn't
I
know
think
that.
even
I
I think
didn't know
even
that.
Glenn Coffey Johnson was the same situation.
Yeah, you know, so I mean,
Well, speak about guys with the O's. Here's two guys. One, Glenn Johnson, and then you take Vernal Phillips. Two guys that, you know what,
Much
they
better
have
than their
those
records,
losses.
yeah.
Yeah, better than their records, but they never got the big paydays because exactly the thing. They had those losses on their records.
Marketability, they weren't marketable.
but that's today's
But they were
boxing.
good.
Today, right.
Today.
Yeah.
You know,
Good.
because you know, yesteryear, and not that long ago, 20, 30 years ago, I think that the boxing fan was more knowledgeable
Yes.
of the
Yes.
sport.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
like Alex said before,
Yep.
they're looking
Exactly.
at, oh, this guy's a title holder. We joke about it all the time, that there's got to be more fighters today with belts than there are without.
Yeah.
We watched all these fights yesterday, not one world champion on the card last night. And every one of them came out with belts. You know, one guy even came out, I think it might have been the main event, he comes out to, here comes the champion, here comes the champion. I said to Alex, what belt does he have? He doesn't have any.
John Scully
You know?
says to me, he goes, "What's a guy from Virginia have the Caribbean Fed Latin title for?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's some guys, you know, I know, it's crazy, man. And you know, I don't think we can ever go back to the way it was.
It's tough. It's just like giving somebody something for nothing. It's awful hard to take it away once he's getting it for nothing, you know?
Uh-oh.
Well,
But we'll leave the social aspect out.
We're talking boxing now, Alex.
Well, and to sort of make that connection there is that what you were saying is that earlier about how, you know, in terms of the mainstream fan and how do we change that if you're putting in front of the mainstream fan, this guy is 23-0 and you should admire him and you should think of that as as some sort of standard in the sport. Well, the only way to change that is to educate the mainstream fan. And
Do they want to be educated?
well, and that's just maybe not.
I do.
Maybe not. Maybe some of them don't.
but
And I think that. But see, the problem with that is that.
No, but I think they do.
I think that you know, what bothers me a lot is that you go to the water cooler, the old term, you know, Monday morning, you go to the water cooler, Joe Schmo that isn't a diehard anything fan, he'll talk about the baseball games over the weekend, the football games, even a hockey game, you know, and then the only fights he's going to talk about are those big pay-per-views that we're spending $70-80 for.
Right.
And he's not talking about the real club shows that are the backbone of the sport.
Right, but see that was my
Yeah.
point, is that
Right.
real change comes from the bottom up. So what that would mean is
That's
that
true.
you by educating the people in like, you know, by forms of media, by writing and stuff like that, in terms of covering the sport, and if you watch a fight and explaining why this guy is better than his record, that's the way just any kind of change comes. Is that slowly, because the guys who are making money, it's not in their interest to change at all. I mean, one of the things that up at the Hall of Fame yesterday was women's boxer Mia St. John was there. She was talking about how some of the fights that are definitely ones that people want to see in women's boxing just don't get made, in part because maybe there's a little pocket of people in one region that support one of the fighters, and then another little pocket in another region that support the other, but they can't find a site that fills an arena. But the thing is, we see lots of fights that get made, and there's significance attached to them simply because they do have a site to put a fight together.
Yeah, but
so I think the only way to counteract that is if the people watching know this doesn't mean what they're saying it means.
But the part she left out, and this is a good to go back to when you were mentioning about the promoter, is that no promoters promote female boxing. That's the problem. There's very few promoters that are associated with female fighters. You know, Fresquez with Holly Holm, Sauerland Events with Cecilia Brackus are the two top ones. But, you know, we can blame everybody. Right now we can blame, and I say this a lot on our show, but you could blame the managers, you could blame the fighters for being greedy, we could blame the networks and the suits, we could blame them all. And we can also blame the fans, we could blame the promoter. But I believe if you have to blame one, I think it is the promoter. The early promoters, going way back in the bare knuckle times, Alex and I, we learned stuff like, you know, you'd get 10,000 people show up at a bare knuckle fight. They would sell tickets with no date, no location. You know, that's promoting. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you get 10,000 people to
Well,
show
they were
up.
hiding from the police, because a lot of,
Okay,
you know what I mean?
but-
That's why they didn't want to put it out there.
Okay, but that's still. I mean, how do you sell? You know, 10,000 tickets with no date. I mean, talk about
There you go. That's
talk
good.
about the grapevine.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Johnny Dangerously, the grapevine has changed.
Yeah.
But today's promoter has
Yeah.
gotten lazy. They
Yeah.
make fight. What would you have said if a promoter said to you when you fought in the late '60s? Hey, Bob, we want to put you on the show, but how many tickets can you sell?
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
you're like, wait a minute, I'm training, I'm
Yeah.
preparing for the fight. You know, I'll get people to come see me,
Yeah.
but what? You making me sell tickets
Yeah.
for my purse? That's
push
what they do
tickets-
today.
They push tickets on, even back then, they'd push them on you.
To
Oh.
fight for your purse?
Yeah, well, no, Sam Silverman would sometimes pay a guy his 40 tickets. Okay, you sell those 40 tickets.
You keep all the money.
And you keep the money, okay. And that, you know, and he said, well, if you can't bring 40 people in here, why would I have you fight on my card? Yeah, it kind of made a little bit of sense, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I guess.
From a promoter's standpoint, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a pain in the ass, it really was. And you're right, you got a fight to worry about. You also got to worry about ticket stubs and
Right.
getting all the money in.
Right.
And who stiffed you on the tickets?
Right.
You know, we'll pay you next
meanwhile,
day.
you're
Oh,
trying to
That's a better fight. That's a better fight than the one you're gonna have in the ring, right? The guy who stiffed you for $20, you know. But I think promoters don't really promote as well anymore. They want that big pay-per-view. They want to get involved
Yeah.
with that. But
They're lazy.
But these
They're
club
lazy.
shows that are the backbone, we see it all the time when we go to these shows, Dax. That you know, we look around. Even last night, Alex, you know, we're looking around going, "This is the Hall of Fame weekend. This place should be mobbed."
Yeah.
You know, and we knew that, okay, they just announced this fight 3 weeks ago, but then we noticed other things. Every fighter was, you know, had to be flown in. There was no local kids on the show.
Oh, yeah, you gotta have
You
local
gotta
talent.
have, you know.
Gotta have it. That's the glue that holds a card together, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes a
Well,
big...
and look at the fans' reaction. I mean, those first couple of bouts where they were fighters from different states or different nations, the crowd was pretty quiet. As soon as you had a Buffalo guy in, they woke up.
Yeah, and the one...
Because where are we? We're in upstate New York, so that's
right.
what they want to see.
And the guy who upset in the main event, he actually was a last-minute sub from Albany, which is about 2 hours from there.
Nick Brinson,
Yeah, you know, so a lot of things have changed, and you know, we were talking about media. You tossed that in. You know, the internet, I think, was good and bad for the sport. I mean, today, you know, way back when, you know, every single newspaper in the United States had a boxing beat
Yeah,
reporter.
that's right.
You know, so you'd be able to pick up the newspaper the next day and find out what happened,
Right.
or the Ring magazine. Everybody waited to get it to see
Yeah.
what the rankings were.
Yeah.
Well, now, you know, we could go online and you know, the writers sitting next to us were writing stories that are being uploaded. You know, as soon as the fight, Alex was tweeting what was going on,
Facebook.
punch by punch. You know, people that aren't here are picking it up. I mean, that's changed the game a lot since when you fought.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you 100% on that. But I mean, that's life. I mean, we're evolving in all aspects of our life, and boxing, right along with it, is stuck in that mix. So
You think it's hurting the sport, Alex?
I think maybe in some ways, but I think like what Bob said, it's true. It's like just like in anything else, there's going to be an adjustment period. I think boxing has done well in some ways. I mean, for me, I think if I was a fan just starting out, I'd be pretty thrilled that now you can follow your favorite fighters on Twitter. You can befriend them on Facebook. You can see boxing news every single day. When I got into the sport, the New York Times had a boxing writer, the New York Post had a boxing writer, USA Today, they all did. But the thing is, there wasn't a boxing article every day. There wasn't, boxing magazines would come out much later.
Right.
So in terms of that, in terms of getting a hold of news, little tidbits of information, it's great today. The thing is it really information that means anything?
Well, let me
Maybe
ask you.
not.
There you go.
Let me ask you
There
this,
you go,
Dax. Today, you know, I think that a lot of this technology has taken advantage of the true boxing fan. And what I mean by that is, just like we were talking about pay-per-views, the cost of the pay-per-views, only the big fights are on pay-per-view. Not only did yesteryear a boxing fan could go buy a ticket, go see an event, maybe watch it on Gillette Fight Night or something. Now we get club shows, and then the big shows are pay-per-view. We even take it a step further. You got Greed Factor coming in with webcasts of club shows that they want you to pay for, $9.99. So I mean, why are boxing fans fleeced the most out of any other sport in this country or any other country? There's no other sport. You can watch a baseball game, a football game, a basketball game on regular TV or listen to it on the radio for nothing. But boxing isn't like that.
And it's, you hit it on the head. It's more this country, because in any other country, well, take an example, every week, and you mentioned female boxing before, every week when I do my rundown on the show, every week I mention female fights. Where are they? Mexico and Argentina. And you know what? They headline.
Well, they have a fan base.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They headline, it's all about the promoting. And as Bob was saying, back in his day, we get 40 tickets here. You sell these 40 tickets, bring these guys in, it's going to help you get paid. You know what? In a way, though, Bob, that's kind of good nowadays. Because look at nowadays, we were talking about this or on Facebook or something. Now, all the fighters now, last night, Miguel Cotto, he promoted the card. You got Saul Alvarez, he's a promoter now. Obviously, Oscar De La Hoya, the Klitschko's went into it, Ricky Hatton. Now all these fighters, you know what? If I'm selling the tickets to my own fight anyway, I might as well get all the money for it instead of just sell the tickets so I can get paid my thing and make you the money. It's smart. It's an evolution. As you were saying, little by little, things are changing. Guys are getting smarter and guys are understanding.
Well, what would you change about? If there's aspects of sport that you don't like now, what would you change? What would you like to bring back?
8 weight divisions, number one. One world champion.
Yeah.
I would like to have one world champion in every division, even if we couldn't give up all the bogus divisions, the 2-pound differences. Even if we have to keep 32 weight divisions, I would much rather have one champion.
Yeah.
And every single one of these sanctioning bodies are against unification.
You got to climb the ladder
Well,
too.
because it's against
Right.
their best interest. Their best
that's just,
interest.
Money.
Right, they could make a lot more money by promoting lots of title fights, and I think that's where boxing is a niche sport, and today we still have it's a very enthusiastic niche, but it is a niche.
It's a niche within a niche. Sports are a niche. Sports are a niche.
That's good.
Right? And then boxing's a niche within that. So you're that much down. It's sad, really. It's sad because you got all these champions. We got division in the sport where we need continuity. Like Alex said, all these different sanctioning bodies. Let me ask you this: can you name how many world? It's kind of funny because the era that you fought in, every one of us, we're all old enough to know, at one time remember. I know who every champion is.
Yeah.
I know who this guy is, that guy, right?
Yeah.
Now, I talk to people on the street and they're like, "Oh, I used to follow boxing. Who's the champion?" The last one I remember is Mike Tyson. And even he came in an era where there was multiple belts. I mean, how much has that changed? What do you think of a world champion, an interim world champion, a world champion in recess, a super world champion, a silver world champion, a diamond world champion? I mean, I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up. How ridiculous is
You
that?
just made my stomach feel.
Exactly. And then we said, "What's wrong with the sport?" What do you mean? What's wrong with the sport?
There you go.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's ridiculous, and it's morphed into something that's just unpleasant. If you're a fight fan, it's just nauseating to see what's happening to it. But what's it going to change? People will eventually get sick of it too. You don't have to be a diehard fight fan. After a while, you say, "This is a lot of baloney here."
They are now.
Yeah, but wait a minute. What's happening? Yeah,
Even
but
nowadays they are. That's why a lot of people, even the fans, don't
good,
only
good.
recognize whoever has the ring.
Wait a minute. The older fans that can compare to what we've lived through to see change, but the younger fans, Alex, I know you're going to agree with me. They've accepted the way things are. They are okay with a guy like Floyd Mayweather. He's great because of his O. They're okay with this belt and that belt. He's a champion. He's a world champion. Is it ever going to be? Are we ever going to get the power? Once our generations are all looking from grass at the other end of looking at grass from the opposite end. I mean, when and I put this in perspective, 25 years from now, Floyd Mayweather, is he going to be looking? Are they going to remember the fighters from the 20s and the turn of the century and that kind of stuff? Maybe not.
Can I just stick my nose in here briefly, okay? I teach a boxing course. I used to teach a boxing course when I was on the job, okay? And I would have a class of 100 recruits in front of me, okay? And I would ask them, who knows who John L. Sullivan was? And I'll have 100 people in front of me, all young guys, okay? And I might get a 2 or 3, 4 hands. I'm not kidding you. That's all. That's all.
Yeah.
And John L., I mean, 100 years ago was a rock star, 120 years ago. But, so it's the way of the world, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with how things have changed, overall. But I do still think that there are going to be people that do know, and that and I think there are writers that cover the sport today that do a very good job at explaining that, or sort of deconstructing what's put in front of them by promoters. Because again, a lot of times it is promoters, and this is good and bad about boxing. In a business sense, in terms of free enterprise, because there's no single organization, like you were saying earlier, how no other sport has that, where these lots of little promoters are able to, make a living, set up a system where they put on shows repeatedly, and maybe have their own sort of regional champions with sort of paper titles, whatever, and there's a bogusness to it. But if it keeps making money, they don't care, because it's generating. That's part of the problem. Without a league, then you do have these promoters who might have a scorched earth policy of, like, they don't care how it affects the broader sport, they care about how much they make. The thing is that you're going to need writers, you're going to need the fans to sort of be able to see that and interpret what's really happening there, and it is hard.
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, and the business of boxing, obviously, we could go on and on and on. Thank you for joining us. Bob, I appreciate your time. Dax, Alex, I'm Billy C. Until next time for our next roundtable, we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.